Happening now on a special edition of Grid Tonight. Although there were a few pauses in action throughout the day due to crashes and weather, we essentially got a full day of practice for the Indy 500. Which drivers look quick and who still has some work to do the night before Fast Friday? Hello to all of our viewers watching here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Kobe Lambert, and with me is Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and LastCar.info. We encourage everyone to comment in the chat below, ask questions, and support us through Super Chat. Now I'll hand over to Ben for tonight's recap of the Thursday practice session for the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500.
Thank you, Kobe. Apologies to all our viewers for being a few minutes late. We're having some issues with StreamYard and going live. We appear to be live now, so keep your fingers crossed that we stayed live for tonight's special edition of Grid Tonight. And Kobe, as you mentioned, nearly a full day of practice. We still got interrupted by some weather throughout the day, but Arrow McLaren's Pato Award was the quickest at 228.861 miles per hour on a day with plenty of storylines. Now, on yesterday's episode of this show, Kobe, you said that Award has a lot to prove after the last few Indy 500s have led to some criticism. The examples you brought up included lifting on the outside of Marcus Ericsson while going for the win instead of keeping his foot on the gas in 2022. Then last year in 2023, again with Ericsson, Award made an aggressive move on the inside entering turn 3 and ended up crashing out of the race. Now with his number 5 Chevrolet looking like a rocket entering Fast Friday tomorrow, Award's demeanor seemed cool, calm, and collective. Photo on your screen, courtesy of Joe Skibinski, hope I got that name right, from Penske Entertainment. Now after being in the hunt for the win in recent Indy 500s, Kobe, is this finally the year that Award might seal the deal?
I think he has the potential to win the Indy 500, but Willie, I still don't know that yet. I think I still need to see a few more days of him on the track and what he's able to accomplish. But certainly topping the charts, can't go wrong there. I think Pato Award is having a good month of May so far, and we'll see if it can continue in the Fast Friday, then qualifying over the weekend in the practice session or in the weekend carb day, and see where he's at then. But yeah, I'm not going to go into detail of what I said last night, but after the last 2 years, you can see that Pato Award, is obviously in the hunt to win this race, and I think the same could be said this year as well. I know it's kind of weird for Pato Award having a win this year at St. Pete, considering the fact that he didn't lead a single lap in his race. It doesn't, have the laps led and all that, but he still has a win. But I really think Pato Award and this number 5 team are ready to claim the moment, and it could be on Memorial Day Sunday.
Well, Kobe, when there was a pause in the action today, the broadcast showed a group of kids behind Award's pit box chanting, "We want Pato, we want Pato." He came over to those kids and signed autographs for them, and no matter where INDYCAR goes as a series, Award seems to have a large and passionate fan base. So do you think INDYCAR is doing enough to capitalize on his popularity? We talk all the time about how the series has to up their game in terms of marketing. Are they doing enough to capitalize on Pato?
I'm gonna say probably not, and it is so amazing to see, all the Pato fans, like you said, Ben. Wherever we go, you see them in St. Pete, you see them at Long Beach, you see them at Texas Motor Speedway. When they went there, you see them at Indy as well. Pato has just built this massive fan base, and I have no idea why. He has this large following, but it's there, and I think INDYCAR should be doing everything they can to capitalize on him. If they can get him on, these popular talk shows on television, I think they should try to get him on those, since he's a recognizable name. He's basically the Chase Elliott of INDYCAR in terms of popularity, or the Lando Norris of INDYCAR, because a lot of people know Lando, and obviously Pato Award stars continuing to grow on and off the track, and I know INDYCAR is going to try to shake up the schedule in the next few years or so, and I think if they want to potentially go to an international round, like I've said in previous episodes of Grid Tonight, I think they should try to go to Mexico City. I think that would be a great way to capitalize on Pato's popularity, to have a race in his home country, especially with him being one of the most popular INDYCAR drivers. I know there was a lot of rumblings of them potentially going to Argentina, try to capitalize on the popularity of Agustin Canapino, and Ricardo Juncos, the co-owner of Juncos Hollinger Racing, been from Argentina. But I think Pato, no offense to those guys, but I think Pato Award is definitely, the big star here. And I feel like a race in Mexico would really do the INDYCAR series a lot of justice.
Kobe, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think that's absolutely something that the series should consider if they want to go international. Of course, I think that, we have, a lot of great tracks here in the United States that INDYCAR should be looking at as well. And I actually saw a tweet from Adam Stern just before we came on the air that they're probably not going to look at too many major schedule changes for 25, but they are looking at 26 and what opportunities might be available to them there. I think Mexico is certainly an opportunity that they have to look at, given Award's popularity and given the sizable fan base that follows him around. If you go to his home country, bring that race to those fans, I think it'll do IndyCar wonders. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on as we talk about the future of the IndyCar schedule. Now, for the second straight day, all three Team Penske Chevrolets looked pretty good. Scott McLaughlin was second fastest, Joseph Newgarden fifth, and Will Power ninth. Alex Palou and Colton Herta were also in the top five. They were third and fourth, respectively. Then you had Marco Andretti, Linus Lundqvist, and Ed Carpenter take positions 6th through 8th. Scott Dixon rounded out the top 10. We expect him to be fast every year at IMS. However, Herta was the fastest, specifically in qualifying trim at 224.182 miles per hour. Kobe, do you expect this to be the same group that we talk about in contention for the pole this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's certainly going to be interesting in these next few days because typically during the first few days of Indy 500 practice, we're just looking at the overall times overall. But starting tomorrow, Fast Friday, we're really going to start paying attention to those no-toe speeds to see who's fastest by themselves. Then we'll have a good indication of who's going to potentially be in play for the pole. But yet, to answer your question, I think absolutely it would not surprise me if one of those drivers who were in the top 10 fastest they ended up winning the pole, or at least starting on the front row, or at least making it to the pole shootout. Looking at Colton Herta, been the fastest in qualifying trim there, and Andretti always brings fast cars. You have Marco up there as well. The Carpenter car is always fast in qualifying. I was surprised not to see Rinus VK up there, but I'm sure once they get that car in full qualifying trim and turn up the wick tomorrow, he'll certainly be up there once again. And then the Penske's, self-explanatory that they're always quick at this track, whether it's in race trim or qualifying trim. So it would not surprise me to see them up there. And looking at Scott McLaughlin, I think, honestly, out of the group up there, he's probably one of my biggest surprises up there because McLaughlin, during his time in the Indianapolis 500, it exactly has not gone as planned. But I feel like this could be the year that McLaughlin finally gets the finish that he deserves in this race.
Well, Kobe, just to follow up on this group of 10 here real quickly. Of these 10 that were fastest here today and maybe showing the most speed going into Fast Friday and into the weekend, who do you think would be the most likely of these 10 to take pole position?
I have to say probably Alex Palou again. I think Alex Palou has a lot of momentum once again for the second straight month of May, and it will not surprise me to see him get the pole again, and maybe he'll eclipse the time they had last year. Who you got?
It's hard to bet against Scott Dixon. It seems like almost every other year he's on the pole, or at least on the front row close to it. Marco Andretti got a pole here a few years ago. He could be a threat, and I know he's motivated as ever, despite the fact that he's a one-off driver now, only running this one race and coming over to do some NASCAR and SRX and other things, but still passionate about the 500. Then you had Herta fastest in qualifying trim. We'll see if that holds tomorrow and Fast Friday, but I'd probably lean towards your selection there with Palou as well. But again, if he's going to do it, like I've been saying on this show the last couple of weeks, I think he's got to go through Scott Dixon to get there because he's always the man to beat. And Dogfish appears to agree with me there as well. Dixon, McLaughlin, and Armstrong, an interesting pick for third there. So, excuse me. So we will know soon enough who might be in contention there. I'm sure we'll get a better understanding and idea of that tomorrow, assuming we get some quality laps in. Of course, the weather's been messing with us all week here. Hopefully, keep your fingers crossed. We're able to get at least mostly full session in on Fast Friday tomorrow. Now let's go to the other. Or sorry, go ahead, Kobe.
That's the elephant in the room, the weather. Which has been disrupting this entire week. It doesn't matter where it's at. Cars Tour races got rained out at North Wilkesboro Speedway. Unfortunately, those have to be rescheduled to a later date. We'll have to see what the weather looks like for All-Star Weekend. It looks like we could certainly be in for some delays there in Wilkes County, North Carolina, and then up in Speedway and then at the Indianapolis. It looks like tomorrow, could potentially be a washout, and then Saturday, Sunday, we'll have to wait and see. And I wonder what IndyCar will decide to do if Fast Friday gets washed out altogether. I know they have that, short practice session on the morning of qualifying Saturday, and then they go straight into the qualifying trials where they're gonna, set where they're gonna set a large portion of the field, and then you're gonna have, the pole session, then the last row shootout, and all of that on Sunday. So I wonder what IndyCar would do there, Ben. So the question I want to ask you, if let's say if Fast Friday gets rained out, what do you think the best course action would be for IndyCar to do?
Kobe, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm struggling to remember a year where we've had this much weather impact this week of practice here. And, to your point, obviously, if we don't get Fast Friday in tomorrow, I think it'd be asking the teams a lot to just go ahead and trim the cars out and put them out there, trying to run laps, 4-lap averages of 230 plus. I think, some drivers and teams might not be super comfortable with that. So I would at least hope that they could give them, an hour or two in the morning to try to go out there and run at least a couple of laps in qualifying trim before rolling into qualifying. But who knows what's going to happen? I hopefully it's not a bridge that we even need to cross, because we'll get some laps in tomorrow on Fast Friday. But if weather's a factor again, then I don't know. They will have to cross that bridge when we get there on Saturday, and it's going to be an interesting call from race control and from IndyCar and IMS what we decide to do. But like I said, I'm struggling to remember. Maybe it exists off the top of my head. I can't think of it, but at least in recent memory, how many days, how many hours we've lost to weather and the rain this week. It's really quite fascinating to see what IndyCar is going to do here.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that we'll somehow get enough running tomorrow where the teams are satisfied. Maybe not a full day of running, but just enough where the teams like we were able to check all our boxes and we're ready to go for Saturday.
Well, let's take a look at the bottom of the charts now, to the other end of the timing charts here. And Christian Lundgaard finished the day in 30th with 222.061 miles an hour being his lap average. Pietro Fittipaldi, Christian Rasmussen, Nolan Siegel, and Stingray Robb close out the field of 34 entries, going for 33 spots. This is exactly where these drivers don't want to be at the end of the day on Saturday, because that would mean going to the last row shootout. Kobe, although this was the first day of the week where we got pretty much a full day under our belts, should any of these teams and drivers start feeling worried as we head into the weekend?
Well, looking at the weather forecast, especially if you're not going to have Fast Friday to work on your cars, if I was these teams, I would be worried. But if we're going to get some running tomorrow where you can at least see where you're at and work on your car, then I wouldn't be worried. So if tomorrow's forecast look really good, I would not be worried just yet, but I would panic at the end of the day on Fast Friday. But we just don't know what the weather's going to do, if Mother Nature's going to allow them to have any track time or not. But it's interesting, you have Christian Lundgaard down there in 30th, and you have teammate Pietro Fittipaldi in 31st, and we've been talking about this for the past year. Look what the Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan cars were last year, in the last row shootout, down on speed, and seeing two RLL drivers down there, and Graham Rahal was just a few positions ahead of Christian Lundgaard, and down a few positions ahead of Rahal. It was Takuma Sato, so I'm sure Bobby Rahal doesn't want to see his cars going through the exact same thing 2 years in a row. So I think in regard to these teams that I guess below the cut line, in 30th place, I wouldn't start worrying just yet. But if we're not going to have track time tomorrow, then you have to start thinking, oh my goodness, are we going to be able to get this into the show, especially with one driver missing the field?
Well, some other drivers that might be a little bit worried, especially if we don't have that practice time, Kobe, would be drivers that had an on-track incident today. And before lunchtime, we saw the first crash of the week. Chip Ganassi Racing rookie Linus Lundqvist got loose in turn 2 and hit the wall with the rear of his number 8 Honda. Thankfully, Lundqvist got out of the car under his own power. However, now his team will have to repair the car, and a driver attempting his first Indy 500 will lose that valuable track time needed, given his inexperience of a 2.5-mile track. As I mentioned, he's a rookie, and learning this super speedway style of oval racing can be quite challenging for a young driver. I wonder if it would be a little bit less challenging if Indy Next had some sort of 100-mile race of their own at this track. I don't know. Maybe we could call it the Freedom 100 or something like that. I don't know. Just an idea that popped in my head here. Maybe we give these drivers a little bit more experience leading up to their first Indy 500. But in all seriousness, Kobe, do you think there was anything Lundqvist could have done differently to prevent this wreck? And do you anticipate his confidence taking a hit because of it?
Long live the Freedom 100, gone but never forgotten. but on a serious note, Ben, honestly, I think that this was just a situation of a young driver just trying to find the limit of the car, and he found the limit. And I guess Linus, will go back to the drawing board and understand where he went wrong here. But sometimes in these cases, the car just takes off, and then you're just a passenger after that, and it can be easy to lose your confidence, after taking a hit, especially at a track going this rate of speed, because Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a very demanding racetrack, especially when you're going 230 miles per hour down into turn one. And when you crash at this track, you crash hard. There's no easy, there's no, I guess, soft crash at Indianapolis. There's nothing but hard crashes. And that was quite a smack to the wall that Linus Lundqvist took. But he's certainly not the first young driver, to have an accident at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I remember Alex Palou. He had a hard crash at Indianapolis, and still end up coming back to have a good race. And then Pato O'Ward, I believe it was his first attempt at the Indy 500. He had a really hard crash and almost ended up going upside down. I believe that was the one he failed to qualify for when he got bumped from the field. So Lundqvist, definitely not the first young driver to have an issue here at Indianapolis, and it can affect your confidence. But I think Linus Lundqvist is very strong on the mental side when it comes to these races. So I don't think it's going to hamper him at all.
Yeah, you're right, Kobe. I think a lot of people forget that Pato O'Ward. Everybody obviously remembers Fernando Alonso failing to qualify, but that was a Carlin partnered McLaren entry, and the two Carlin cars were driven by Max Chilton and Pato O'Ward, and they were the other two that also failed to qualify that year. So Pato O'Ward has been there himself as a rookie at this track and at this race, but as you said, and as we talked about at the top of the show, he's bounced back and has been in contention to win it the last couple of years. Things gone slightly differently, or if he lifted when he shouldn't have, or kept his foot in the gas, or whatever the case may be, done things slightly differently on the last couple of laps. We could just as easily, I think, be talking about him as a potential Indianapolis 500 winner. So certainly not all hope lost for Linus Lundqvist here, but you have to think it's going to rattle him a little bit as we go into the most important part of qualifying week here and practice week. But hopefully he can rebound from that. Let's talk about the driver that used to drive that number 8 Honda for Chip Ganassi, former winner of the 500. Nearly went back-to-back last year. Even he had a big crash in the afternoon. That's Marcus Ericsson, his number 28 Andretti Global Honda. Got really low in turn 4, ended up getting loose, spinning out hard into the inside wall. Then it slid down the track into the inside wall on the front stretch before making contact a third time with the attenuator at the end of pit lane. Now, Ericsson got out of the car, was checked and released from the infield care center. However, his Andretti team will now have a busy night ahead of them, preparing a backup car for Fast Friday. Again, that's weather permitting, assuming we get some track time in tomorrow. So, Kobe, it's like you said, the elephant in the room. Tomorrow's weather forecast looking pretty iffy, at least in the morning. We'll see if it clears up in the afternoon. But could Ericsson potentially go into qualifying without much time, or maybe not even any time at all, to shake down this backup car? We may have lost Kobe here. I'm seeing his screen backstage appears to be frozen. So we'll give his internet a minute here, see if he can come back and rejoin us in a moment. And he's now disappeared entirely. So while we wait for Kobe to come back, if anybody's watching us live here on YouTube, if you have any questions regarding practice today, feel free to ask them in the chat. I can do my best to hold the fort down while Kobe tries to get his internet figured out here. A little bit hesitant to move on in the script without him. So like we mentioned, Ericsson, again, the other driver that had an issue today and an on-track incident, certainly not what he wanted to see. Again, on this first day of really a full practice session here at the Indianapolis 500, leading into Fast Friday and qualifications this weekend. But fortunately, the good news is he got out of the car, was checked and released from the infield care center, but he is going to a backup. So it is going to be certainly a difficult day for him tomorrow if we can't get that track time in going into Fast Friday. And we'll just have to wait and see. I know that they are certainly going to be hoping for some clear skies tomorrow, so we can get that track time in, and he can shake down that backup car here. Still no sign of Kobe being back here, so I guess in the meantime, assuming he gets his internet back and rejoins the stream, I will move on here in the script, and we'll circle back and I'll ask Kobe the questions when he comes back to us here. In the meantime, like I mentioned, if you have any questions in the chat room, you can feel free to drop them on YouTube or wherever you're watching, and I'll display them and do my best to hold the fort down for Kobe in the meantime. Now, one of the biggest developments at the beginning of the day was Kyle Larson's number 17 Era McLaren Chevrolet sitting in the garage area when practice got underway. The team saw something they didn't like with the engine, so they decided to change it to be on the safe side. Connor Daly's team also changed their engine. As we know, there was limited running on Tuesday and Wednesday due to the weather. Now Larson has lost valuable track time again over something totally out of his control. He got on track for the first time today and about 90 minutes, or he got on track about 90 minutes into the session, rather. In the end, he was 25th fastest today and only completed 29 laps. After he completed his first few laps, he was even 34th, dead last on the grid. So you have to imagine it is very frustrating to miss out on this track time, especially given the magnitude of what Larson is trying to do here. Log laps and get prepared for his first Indianapolis 500 before coming back to the Coke 600 later that same evening. This is certainly, not the situation that he would have wanted to be in either. And, we'll keep an eye on him and that number 17 team. I know that they are also trying to get all the laps in that they can get. But again, due to the engine issue today, they are certainly lacking for track time here as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see if he can bounce back. And I know he's also, like Marcus Ericsson, got to be looking to get some track time in tomorrow. And hopefully the weather doesn't seem to hinder their progress that they would be trying to make here. Looks like Kobe's back here, so I'll bring him back on the screen. Kobe, how are you doing? Got everything
I'm
cleared for the internet?
Yeah, for some reason, I think it's related to the StreamYard issues that was going on. I just got booted out of the stream, and it wouldn't let me log back in for some odd reason. But I'm here now, so hopefully we'll go the rest of the way without having any issues.
Yeah, I had that happen to me last summer. Actually, I think it was filling in on this show. I think there's been one time before that I've been booted out of the stream entirely. But I wonder, like I mentioned at the top of the show, we were having trouble just going live tonight, and we had to make a second attempt to do that. Fortunately, everything seems to be going fine now. We've been live since we went on the air around 7:35 Eastern time. But Kobe, I'll follow up. I don't know how much of the script you heard before you got booted out of the stream, but I'll ask you a question about Ericsson here. Obviously, tomorrow's weather forecast looking pretty iffy. What would it mean for the 28 team if Ericsson has to go into qualifying without much time to shake down that backup car that they have to bring out after his crash today?
Oh, that's definitely a situation that the 28 team doesn't want to be in. But after looking at their speeds on the no-tow report, I think that they're going to be perfectly fine and get into the Indianapolis 500 without having to go to the last row shootout. And this is a point they brought up on the NBC broadcast today on Peacock. It was the fact that when Colton Herta had his scary crash, I believe it was on Carb Day when he flipped over, Andretti tried to rebuild his car in time for the race, but it just wasn't right. It was slow to end up retiring the car because he was like going dangerously slow around that track. But the thing that Ericsson has on his hands that Herta didn't have for him was, he has time on his hands. It's best that you have a shunt now rather than on Carb Day and then you're on a race against the clock to try to get the car ready for the race. But I think Andretti's going to take their time with this car and work through the night if they have to, and make sure that the backup car is just as strong as the primary. And I think that they're probably going to have a lot more time to get this car ready, especially when you look at the forecast and what could be coming from Mother Nature coming soon. But yeah, I don't think this crash is going to slow down Ericsson's efforts for the month of May.
Yeah, well, another driver that is certainly hoping we get as much track time in as possible because he's run some limited laps. That's Kyle Larson. Obviously, everybody's been following what he's been trying to do with his attempt of a double here. But Kobe, while you were still trying to get back in, I went through his day and the rundown with his engine issue and having to change that and losing out on that end of track time, and then not really being able to work his way up the time charts here. So in your estimation, how frustrating is it for him and the McLaren Hendrick partnered number 17 team to miss out on that track time, especially when he is an Indianapolis 500 rookie is trying to just log his first laps at speed and get prepared for what he's trying to pull off here with the double?
Oh, I think it's extremely frustrating. And if you watch his interview today, you could hear the frustration in his voice. And not just for him, for anyone who's trying to run the Indy 500 for the very first time, or especially if you're not used to this style of racing. I think the best thing in this situation is being able to lot laps. And unfortunately, due to the engine-related issues and whatever the strategy was down there in the McLaren pits, it just wasn't a day where Larson was able to run a whole bunch of laps. And I think track time is the key, but unfortunately they ran out of time to be able to, go out there and race trim and, practice with the slipstreaming and all of that. But now they're in full qualifying mode. They're going to have to get ready for Fast Friday and make sure they can get that number 17, Aaron McLaren / INDYCARs.com Chevrolet into the show. I think that they probably will get into the show, and then once they lock the car into a field, then they can use the Monday. They can use the practice session early in the week, and then they can use carb day to put the finishing touches on this car and see what type of car they can have come race day.
I won't say who it is because I don't know if they want some anonymity right now in terms of who in our chat made a pretty bold prediction earlier today, but and it might be modified here. I'll have to ask this person later, given that Larson was able to get back out on track. But one of our teammates at Grid said that they're predicting Larson might be the one to get bumped. And that is certainly a bold take. But I've got to tell you, with McLaren's history here, obviously nobody thought Fernando Alonso was going to get bumped in 2019. And look what happened. And we've seen some big names before. Graham Rahal, James Hinchcliffe have been bumped. Will Power was in the last row shootout a couple of years ago as well. So you just never know how this is going to work out. And you have to think, if McLaren doesn't like what they see with that engine, despite the fact that Pato O'Ward was at the top of the charts today, Larson's limited track time, as talented as he is, you can never rule anything out here at IMS. So, you certainly have to be hoping. I'm certainly not going to put money on him being in the last row shootout just yet. But if he is, we're going to look back at this as some missed track time opportunity, and it may end up coming back to bite him. We'll just have to wait and see. Dogfish, thank you for sticking with us through some technical difficulties here. Have you watched Kiwis Born to Fly? And I think following up here, it's a documentary about New Zealanders in INDYCAR. I don't believe I've heard of that one. I'll have to check that out. I did watch Scott Dixon's Born Racer that came out several years ago following his 2017 season. I got it on DVD actually at Walmart for $10. So a pretty good deal, and good film, good documentary. Highly recommend, especially if you're a Scott Dixon fan, checking it out. It's a very, very well-produced documentary. We move on now. During the practice broadcast, we saw David Malukas hanging out of a track. Speaking of McLaren and the deal that went down there after his wrist surgery, we know he's still healing from that after injuring it in a mountain biking accident. In several past episodes of Grid Tonight, we've covered this story, including Aaron McLaren's decision to move on from him before he even got the chance to run one race for the team. Now, despite never getting to drive for McLaren, Malukas hopes to continue healing and eventually return to IndyCar competition. He even spent some time on the NBC Sports broadcast in the booth today with Lee Diffie during practice. Kobe, how well do you think Malukas has handled what has to be a very difficult situation?
I think he's handled it probably better than me or you would or anyone else. It's been very surprising, especially given how young he is, to see how he's handling this like a true professional. When Callum Milot was officially announced as the driver of this number 6 Chevrolet, Malukas went on social media and basically wished him good luck and say he'll be rooting for him. I don't know many drivers who would be saying that to the driver who essentially replaced you for the greatest spectacle in racing. But I think David Malukas, his demeanor is going to serve him well in the long run. And instead of getting frustrated, mad, bad mouthing the team publicly, he's decided to be a young professional about it and continue working on healing behind the scenes and see where the cards fall later in the year. On the broadcast, he said he hopes to be cleared basically like mid to late June to really start working towards getting back and testing an IndyCar. We'll have to see what team he will be testing for later in the year if it comes to that. And he talked about Gateway being one of his tracks. I'm sure he would love to race there if there's a seat available. So I think we'll see David Malukas back in IndyCar either later this year or definitely next year in 2025. But overall, I think he's handled this situation extremely well.
Well, let's talk about two drivers that still can't seem to get away from each other, those being Santino Ferrucci and Romain Grosjean. Now, the on-track conflicts that started at Barber continued on the IMS road course and now appears to have had another chapter added to it. Another incident of note took place on the 2.5 mile speedway during practice today. It seemed like Grosjean was trying to pass Ferrucci toward the end of the front stretch entering turn 1, but Ferrucci moved down to prevent Grosjean from making the move. Ferrucci said he moved down to protect his car in case the two drivers made contact with a late move on the inside. Kobe, was this something that just occasionally happens at Indy as part of practice here, or is this something that you fear might get out of hand with this Ferrucci-Grosjean feud, considering the two drivers involved in their history this season so far?
Well, I want to say I hope this doesn't get out of hand. I would hope these two drivers will be smart enough, not to try anything, really silly at 230 miles per hour where someone could get seriously hurt, fly into the catch fence, especially on a high speed oval like this. But uh, but like you were saying about this occasionally happening at Indy, it's not the first time we've seen a driver try to make a move on the inside, and then the driver ahead makes a block. I've seen that happen a lot in practice and in the race, but I think a lot more people are going to be flagging this incident considering the fact that it's Ferrucci and Roman Grosjean. So I'm gonna hold out hope based on what I said. I believe it was on the last Grit Live wrap up show, saying I'm hopeful that both drivers will mind their p's and q's for the month of May, and then when we get to the next road and street course events, if they want to keep their feud going, just have at it, because that would be a lot better to be feuding on those tracks instead of on a 2.5 mile super speedway.
Yeah, Kobe, again, this goes back to the marketing aspect, I guess. I certainly would hope that we don't have things get too out of hand at a track like this because of the speeds and the danger that surrounds every corner here. But, Ferrucci and Grosjean, I think, at least are a couple of marketable personalities here, and that's something that seems to be lacking in motorsports today, specifically in IndyCar. If IndyCar could market these drivers a little bit better, and if Ferrucci and Grosjean give them some content to work with, maybe that might not be such a bad thing. But of course, you don't want to see it get too out of hand here when you're dealing with speeds approaching 240 miles an hour entering the corners. Definitely not something you want to see go too far here. So hopefully they keep it under wraps and we don't see anything of note here throughout the rest of this month of May. Now, another driver who's at the track but isn't driving in the race this year is Jack Harvey. Of course, everybody remembers last year he barely made it into the Indy 500 on a last-ditch, last-minute effort, knocking then teammate Graham Rahal out of the race in the last row shootout on the final run. Harvey is scheduled to drive in every IndyCar race this season except for the biggest race of the year, the Indianapolis 500. While it's disappointing for him to miss the 108th running of the greatest spectacle in racing as a driver, he is still present at the track, supporting Dale Coyne Racing teammates Nolan Siegel and Catherine Legg. Kobe, how much do you think it has to hurt for Harvey to run all the races, but this being the lone exception to that, he's not here for the biggest one of the year as a driver at the Indianapolis 500?
Well, he actually talked about this a little bit when he was being interviewed today on Peacock, and what Harvey said is basically, yeah, you want to be in the Indianapolis 500, obviously, but you also have to look at the bright side of things. He could be sitting on the sidelines all year, but he's just grateful for the fact that he's able to run nearly the entire IndyCar schedule, well over 95% of the schedule he's able to run this year. So he sees that as a blessing within itself, but he's focused on being in this race again next year. But it certainly has to hurt him not to be here for the biggest race of them all. But I think it says a lot about Jack Harvey, who's still been there, support his teammates, Nolan Siegel and Catherine Legg, and just been a team player for the remainder of the month of May. And what I'm gonna say next is, you obviously you don't want to see anything like this happen, but if I'm Jack Harvey, especially with the hard crashes we've seen today, I would still have my helmet ready to go, because as we saw last year, Stephen Wilson got hurt in a crash, and then Graham Rahal was able to fill in. Hopefully no driver gets hurt in practice or qualifying this year, but if it happens, maybe Jack Harvey could be one of the replacement drivers, but like I said, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Saw Jared Hildebrand have a track today too, actually, on the Peacock coverage here. So there are certainly some capable drivers that don't have rides this year that could be on standby. Obviously, like you mentioned, Kobe, we certainly hope that it doesn't come to that. And I think Graham Rahal would even tell you last year that he was happy to do it and fill in, but of course you would have much rather been able to qualify your own car on speed and get into the 500 that way. So it was an unfortunate deal, but again, that's part of the dangers of the sport. I think it is good to have some drivers on standby at the track, and they should probably have their helmets ready to go, like you mentioned, in case something like that does happen. But of course, we certainly hope that it doesn't need to come to that here. Well, Kobe, certainly a lot of storylines all throughout the day that we've looked back on here on tonight's show, and we'll be back on the air tomorrow and keeping an eye on IMS. Hopefully, as we've been talking about the elephant in the room, we get some clear skies and we can get a full Fast Friday in. But even if we don't, we'll have some stories ready to go for you all tomorrow, and we'll be back on the air. So let's take it away and close the show out and look forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, looking forward to Fast Friday, assuming we get it in. And taking a look at our upcoming schedule, like Ben said, we'll be on the air again tomorrow for Fast Friday to recap Indy 500 practice on Saturday, Grid Live pre-race at noon Eastern, and Sunday Grid Live wrap-up. That'll be sometime in the afternoon, but we still don't have a specific time. And we'll be recapping the Supercars races from Perth and Formula One's Amelia Romagna Grand Prix. And then Monday, Ben and Brandon, Grid Encore, they'll recap the truck and all-star race at North Wilkesboro Speedway, including Formula 2 and Formula 3 at Imola. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Now we're on the road to 2,000. Hit the bell icon to get notifications for when we go on the air. Follow all our social media platforms and visit gridranking.com. Take 5 minutes to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Join Colin, Mark DeShell, Rob and David and Matthew, who invest each month in the Grid Network. We encourage you to join these fine folks who keep us on the air. Once we hit $500 per month, we can start sending our team to the track to cover more races and continue expanding our coverage. Link is in the video description below. And if you want to make a one-time donation, click on the Buy Me a Coffee link, get your name on the board, and invest as much as you want. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and they'll thank you right here on the air. You can also support us by donating during our live streams through Super Chat. And with that said, we're out of time for the night. So for Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and LastCar.info, I'm Kobe Lambeth. Thank you so much for watching tonight's show, and we'll see you tomorrow on Fast Friday.